The goal of a lot of college writing is to convince the reader that what the writer is saying is true. And this can be done in so many different ways and in so many different subjects. And we call them rhetorical modes. You can use compare, contrast, cause, effect, description. There's so many different ways that writers can try to convince a reader that what they're saying is true. One really effective way is argumentative or argumentation or persuasive writing, okay? And in this type of mode, you're still going to follow the 5-paragraph essay structure if that's what you're doing in your class, where you have an intro paragraph, a few body paragraphs, and then the conclusion. But something different happens in the body paragraphs. Let me show you. Okay, so we have, as I said, we have an intro paragraph where we have our hook and we have our thesis statement. And a lot of times we have some more background information, but our thesis statement, again, is the point we're making, our opinion that we are showing about the topic in this essay. And then in the body of an argumentative essay, you're going to have multiple paragraphs, and many of them are just going to follow the same structure you are familiar with, if you're familiar with that. And that is just topic sentence, support for that topic sentence, and may or may not have a conclusion. But one thing you should include in at least one body paragraph of an argumentative essay is the counter argument to your argument. And by counter argument, I just mean what the other people are saying about your topic. So maybe you want something to happen and you believe that it should happen one way. For example, in order to graduate from college, you believe that everyone should be required to study abroad. Whereas other people disagree with you and they say, no, studying abroad is a waste of time. That is a counter argument, okay? So at some point in your argumentative essay, you need to show a counter argument, and you need to acknowledge that you're aware that there is a counter argument or that there are counter arguments that oppose what you're saying. And by doing that, you're showing that you're sort of an authority or at least informed about the topic you so strongly are writing about, right? And then from there, you would concede to them, meaning that you would give in a little bit and say, yeah, I see what you're saying, by conceding to them. And then after you concede, you twist it back and you say, but you're wrong. And you refute what they have said by giving another argument. Okay, so the way in which I tell my students is somewhere in the body paragraph, in one of them or all of them, you want to give the counter argument. Okay, that comes first. And then after that, you give your concession, showing that you acknowledge what they're saying and that what they're saying makes a little bit of sense. And then you give your refutation, which is just your argument saying why they're wrong, okay? That is one different part about this type of essay mode, is that you want to have something like that at some point in your paper. And it could come in the first body paragraph, it could come in the second body paragraph, it could come in the third body paragraph, it could come in every body paragraph, or it can just come in one body paragraph. And then the rest of the body paragraphs, you would have your argument in a topic sentence and support. And by support, remember, you can have your own life experiences with examples, or you could use quotes and paraphrases from outside sources that help prove your point, as long as you explain them and show how they support what you're trying to say. So that's a little bit of what I'm going to talk about now in a sample outline and a sample essay. Before looking at an outline and a sample paper, I also want to say that it's really important that whenever you're writing a paper for any type of mode, whether, it be the ones I listed earlier, like compare, contrast, cause, effect, descriptive, classification, whatever mode, right? You want to make sure that the points you're making connect and logically and cohesively. And that's what these transition words and phrases are for. So I have some of those nice transition words here that I want to show you. And these are the ones that you might see often in argumentative papers, okay? So when you want to add support for your argument, you can use any of these words right here. Additionally, furthermore, in a similar way, moreover, similarly, what is more, or likewise. And then here's some examples. So additionally, studying abroad can improve our social lives, or what is more, studying abroad expands our understanding of the world. Now, when you want to introduce the counter argument or the opposing point of view, you can use words like this: although, though, even though, while it is true that, or some might say, or some might argue. And then here's some examples. Even though study abroad can be costly, the benefits outweigh the negative factor. Or, while it is true that studying abroad is costly, the benefits outweigh the negatives. So there's just some examples of transitioning to the counter arguments. And then, of course, you want to concede and show that they're wrong, right? You want to refute them. So you could say, despite this, or in spite of this, or however, or in fact, nevertheless, nonetheless, on the other hand, and yet, as just a few. So let me show you the examples. Some might say that the costs of studying abroad are high. Despite this being true, the benefits outweigh the costs. So in these few sentences here, you see the counter argument, you see a concession, and you see transition to the refutation. Here, studying abroad is expensive. That's the counter argument. However, that's the transition to the refutation. Not going abroad only because of high cost is a mistake. Okay, so those are just some of the transitional words and phrases that can be used in an essay like this. So now let's look at an outline and an essay. Okay, so like I said, you want to make sure you have specific things in the body paragraphs of an essay like this, but you do have a lot of room to play around with where you put those parts. This is what I want my students to do. I give them this outline. Here's the intro paragraph. Just make sure you have a hook, some background information about the topic, some connecting information, like even a transition word that connects that background information to the thesis, which is the last part of the intro paragraph. And then I give this template, something that looks like this: although, and then the opposing point of view, your argument, and the word because with reasons. I'm going to show an example of how this works actually, so don't worry. Then over here, you got the first body paragraph, and it could be set up where it's just your argument right off the bat, or it could be the counter argument and then your refutation to it. But here you can start like this with your point. So you start, topic sentence is your first reason why your argument's true. I give this template. One of the primary reasons why is because right? I'll show you an example. And then you can bring in some support, right? It could always be, at least in my classes, life experience, someone's own personal life experience. But a lot of times it makes it much more effective sometimes to bring in an outside source as well. So you can integrate a quote or a paraphrase, and that's what I want my students to do. Integrate an outside source quote or paraphrase that supports your argument, right? And then you can use any of these methods. There's so many different methods. I give my students 2 different ways. And then you give that quote or paraphrase or summary, and then you need to transition to an explanation of what it means. So I recommend using phrases like this to transition, saying what this means is, or in other words, or clearly. That helps the reader. It signals to the reader that you're going to move from your quote or paraphrase to an explanation and analysis of how that connects to your point, your argument. Then after you use that one of those transitions, you explain how this quote or paraphrase proves your point, the point that you've made in the topic sentence of this paragraph. And I give my students this helper phrase that I got from a colleague that says, this evidence proves my argument is true because it shows that. So use that helper phrase and then finish the sentence. And then once that's done, take out the helper phrase. And then your explanation will be good without it. Finally, at the end of the body paragraph, you can conclude. That's not always something I see in essays and not something that I always think is necessary. But if you want to, you can definitely restate the topic sentence of that paragraph in different words and conclude in that way. Another thing you can do is, instead of concluding, you could add another quote or a paraphrase and an explanation of it, something that supports what you're saying in your body paragraph. Or you could give your own personal experience and talk about how that supports the topic sentence that you've written at the start of this paragraph. And then, of course, you got to have another body paragraph, because you usually have 2 or 3 body paragraphs or many more. So here, second body paragraph, same exact structure. If you want, you could do it like that. Third body paragraph, now this is where the argumentative essay sort of structure comes in. You always want to acknowledge the opposing point of view. You always want to acknowledge what people that disagree with you are saying about this topic. So you can start one of the body paragraphs in your essay with that counter argument. By counter argument, again, I mean what other people are saying about your argument, the people who disagree with you, okay? You want to acknowledge them, because if you acknowledge them, it shows that you've thought about what you're saying and you're aware that people disagree with you. So you can, you point out what other people are saying, and then a nice transition template that I use is some may argue that, and then you give the opposing point of view or counter argument. And then to prove that they're wrong, you need to concede to them and say, yeah, although I see what you're saying and it makes sense, somehow you show them that you understand what they're saying, because once you show them that you understand what they're saying, they're going to listen, and they know that you've processed what they have said, right? So you concede and then you refute. So what is that? You show that you respect what the opposing point of view says by acknowledging it, but then prove that it is wrong and that you are right with your next point, okay? So you can use these types of templates and transitions, and you can say, despite the fact that what you're saying is valid or important or makes sense, whatever you're saying, and then I'm saying, right, you add your argument. You don't have to say I, actually, because it's obvious you're saying it. You could say in spite of the fact that, or although, or even though, or though. You can use those words to introduce your concession, and then your refutation, which is your argument against what other people are saying. And then you argue it. You argue your point. You make it more clear, right? So what is the reason? What is the reason for why you're right? Okay. So you would do that next. Okay. And then you can support it again with quotes, paraphrases, summaries, or your own life experience. And then, of course, transition to explaining the quote and the paraphrase, and make sure you explain how that proves your point. Okay. And then you can conclude again in this paragraph or not, depending on how it flows. If it's always safe to conclude in a paragraph, if you're not sure. And then in the conclusion, restate your thesis, summarize the main points of the body paragraphs, and then end with something to leave the reader with that they can remember once they put your paper down. I like to call it an end hook. So you can you can predict what's going to happen. You could talk about the consequences of something. You could leave with a quote or a rhetorical question. Okay, so now let me show you a sample paper. So over here on the sides, I have some notes that point out every single part of this paper, every little element. Okay, so the first part is the title, right? If you click on it, it explains that it's a phrase, not a sentence, that the first letter of each word is capitalized. Just read through it. You can go through it on your own. And then you see here, I got the hook, and I'm going to read it. I'm going to read through the whole thing. A British politician recently said, in this age of growing interconnectedness, we understand that turning our backs on the world is simply not an option. Because of the rise of the internet, the ease of global travel, and the increase in international trade, the world is more interconnected than ever before. So all of this is just introducing the reader to the topic in an exciting way. It's a hook. And by the way, I forgot to mention that this essay comes from the book that I'm using in my class, Great Writing 5, From Great Essays to Research, by Keith Fultz. It's referenced at the bottom in the works cited page. Okay, so then after the hook, you give some background information, which is happening here. In the past, people could enjoy a successful career without ever moving from their home region, but many jobs involve global interactions. Okay, and the next part is connecting information that connects the background information to the thesis. So given these new conditions, it is essential that college and university students experience new cultures as part of their education. Next part is the thesis statement. And although some people may not believe that studying abroad can be more than just a long vacation, that's the counter argument, colleges and universities should require students to study abroad for at least one semester of their undergraduate education to prepare them for today's interconnected world. There's the thesis. So this person's arguing that studying abroad should be a required part of a college education. And in this thesis statement, a lot of things are happening. The author, the writer, has acknowledged the counter argument. In other words, the opposing point of view, right? This author has mentioned what other people are saying that disagree with her, and she made an argument for why she's right, and proved basically that she acknowledges that they have their point of view, but that hers is what's right. And now we can see what the essay's about. We can see the argument that's going to be made, and now we can move on to the body. Okay, so in the body paragraph, we have a transition that helps us move from the intro paragraph to the first body paragraph, and it's a nice one. I highly recommend this kind of transition. One of the primary reasons, and then your point, right? One of the primary reasons that studying abroad contributes so effectively to students' education is that it requires them to live and learn in a culture that is different from their own. This is the topic sentence of this body paragraph. It is the reason this writer is giving for why her thesis statement and her argument is right, okay? Correspondingly, now this is a transition to a quote or a source. Correspondingly, in their analysis of the educational benefits of study abroad programs, Brewer and Cunningham conclude that real learning is often triggered by a serious dilemma that causes the individuals involved to question assumptions they may have held for their entire lives. This is a paraphrase, okay? So what this writer did was she integrated this paraphrase into her paper by introducing the author, okay, who wrote this and where it was written in an analysis of an educational benefits of study abroad programs. And then it paraphrased what that analysis said. Okay, now we don't stop there. That's great support for her point. This paraphrase supports that topic sentence that came right before it. But now, in order for this to make sense, the writer has to explain how this paraphrase proves her point. Okay, so then you click on the next one, and it's a transition to the explanation. The words, what this means is, it's really important to do that. What this means is, and then we have the explanation. Students are given the chance to reflect on themselves and grow from that process. As Brewer and Cunningham demonstrate, students' daily assumptions are challenged by the experience of living abroad, from simple concerns such as appropriate breakfast foods to more complex matters such as how society should be organized and other cultural conventions. So here we have an explanation of how that paraphrase proves the point in the topic sentence. And then the last part, by experiencing new culture firsthand, students will better appreciate the unique features of both their host and their home countries, as well as better understand the repercussions of these cultural differences. Now, this to me is two things. It's a conclusion for this paragraph, but it also is an explanation of the paraphrase. It's adding to that explanation and how that paraphrase proves that the author's topic sentence and argument is right. All right, and then you move on. The next paragraph does something similar. The next paragraph does something similar. I'm skipping to the paragraph where we see the counter argument here, okay? Here you see the word though, okay? Though studying abroad offers many advantages, that is a transition to the counter argument. The words though, although, even though, despite, these words help the reader recognize that we're introducing an opposing idea, right? So, though studying abroad offers many advantages, some may argue that a semester or year abroad is nothing but a vacation. That's the counter argument. That's what other people are saying, the people that disagree with her. While it is true that some students treat studying abroad as time off, that's the concession. That's where the author acknowledges the counter argument and says, yeah, I get what you're saying. And then you move on. And this is where they say, no, but you're wrong. It's a refutation. The actions of a few students should not invalidate study abroad programs or cause colleges to abandon them. This is the argument against that counter argument, or in other words, the refutation. Okay. Then, how do you support what you just said? You got to support it, right? You can use your own life experience, or you can integrate an outside source. So that's what this person did. In fact, in a long-term study of 3,400 students, Dwyer and Peters found that a large number said studying abroad had an impact on their worldview, 96%, increased their self-confidence, 96%, and gave them the skill set they needed for the career they chose, 76%. So that's just a paraphrase, right? From some study, okay? That's great. It supports the argument that this writer is using. But don't forget, you got to explain how it proves the point that is being made by this writer. So you transition to your explanation clearly. So this is another way you can transition. Clearly, studying abroad is not just a party. Students' home institutions should offer preparatory workshops and orientation seminars so that students are ready for the requirements of the program and will better understand how it connects with their current academic work. This is the explanation of that paraphrase, which proves that this writer's point and argument is right. And then you can conclude. Studying abroad unites academic demands with the thrill of discovering a new culture, and students will gain much more from the experience if they are prepared. And then you have the conclusion paragraph, the last paragraph of the essay, the concluding paragraph, transition to it. Given the numerous benefits of study abroad, colleges and universities should require that their students take advantage of this opportunity while also doing everything possible to keep these experiences affordable through reduced tuition and subsidized fees. And then the next part is, it is essential that students learn to negotiate our increasingly interconnected world by exploring new cultures as part of their education. So these two parts right here have basically just summarized the main points of the essay. And then at the end, we have an end hook. In a world made smaller by technological advances, students who graduate with the experience of living in a foreign culture will also be prepared to succeed in their careers. It's a nice prediction for the future. Then we have the works cited entry right there. Okay, so that's that. I hope that helps you and gives you some more structure and idea with an example of how to write an argumentative paper. Good luck.